What is up? Welcome into this CBS Sports Network edition of Pushing the Pile. You know us, Mike Renner, Kyle Long, the Pushing the Pile crew. We'll also be joined by Bryant McFadden as well today, as we are giving not only some bold predictions, which we'll hit off the top here for the 2024 NFL season, but also breaking down the biggest matchups from this weekend. The NFL killed it. I loved what they did with this opening weekend in terms of the prime time games, whether it's Ravens-Chiefs tonight, Packers-Eagles tomorrow, that Sunday night banger of Lions in Rams, or that Monday night banger of 49ers and Jets. All good ones, and we're going to preview the matchups that will decide those here in a bit. But Kyle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. And you were mentioning all these sexy matchups that the NFL, has poised us for this weekend. And I got to say, top to bottom, it's teams that are fighting for superiority in their division. Might not be the power ranking top players in the NFL, but we're talking about a lot of really good matchups. A lot of questions are going to be answered over the course of the next few days.
Yes, they will. And as always, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And we'll get to some of the odds of some of those games a little later on. But we wanted to start with some high level, some season-long predictions to give you guys where we're standing early on. And I know you don't love bold predictions, so I'll start with my bold prediction.
Okay.
There's one team that I think is getting criminally underrated. We, on Tuesday, talked with Pete Prisco about them, had him in their 20s. I think they will win their division this year. It's not a worst to first situation, but the Seattle Seahawks, I think, will win the NFC West. I look up and down this roster, and I see no reason why they cannot compete with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I also maybe made that bold prediction before Brandon Ayuk resigned and before Trent Williams came back home. Those all obviously make their path a little bit more difficult. But I think when you look at their schedule, obviously not as difficult as the 49ers will have it, I think they have a nice run of it out the gate. Broncos, Patriots, when you get two of probably the lesser teams in the AFC to start it off, the Mike McDonald era there in Seattle, we'll see a 2-0 team heading into a Miami Dolphins game, which they're beat up themselves. And so you get kind of a couple layups to get yourself going, maybe get your offensive line back healthy here. And then I think you see this defense really turn it on. That's where I'm most excited, because I think Mike McDonald, what he did with the Baltimore Ravens last year cannot be understated. They were a top 3 defense in the NFL with, you can say they had top 3 personnel, but it was a lot of the same personnel that was there before him that he got the best out of them. He got career years.
Yes. The margins there.
And that's what it looks like when you have a DC to that caliber. So for me, I think this defense has a massive turnaround from a bottom 10 unit last year to a top 10 unit this year. And then offensively, with what they have at wide receiver, not a lot to dislike. And now we have Bryant McFadden on.
B-Mac.
What do you think of my Seahawks take? Am I out to lunch here?
Mike, you're dead on. You're dead on. And I gave my way too soon playoff prediction some weeks ago, and I actually had Seattle in my playoffs for the NFC. I love their roster. I think they have experience. And if you look at the last time the Seahawks made the playoffs, which was 2 years ago, a lot of their key contributors, especially on the offensive side, they were rookies. You look at Cross, you look at Kenneth Walker, you look at Rick Woolen in the back end for the secondary. All of those guys were rookies that found a way to get into the playoffs, and they had a bit of a letdown a year ago when you factor in some of the more athletic, experienced guys they've added to their team via free agency. And I love the draft, along with Mike McDonald, who is a rookie coach, but they have everything you would want to have plus more to be able to have a significant playoff run this year. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and the vets on the offense, in the right positions. I love Geno Smith, and I think that when you can throw the football naturally like Geno Smith does, there's a handful of guys in the league that just throw it pretty effortlessly, and Geno's in that category. He's got guys to throw it to him, and obviously B-Mac and Mike were just talking about the defense. It's going to be important to see complementary football in Seattle. That'll be the only way to get them out of the division, number one. But also, you can't understate the impact that Seattle fan base has. And when you're trying to come and play on the road against a team like Seattle, it doesn't matter what team you're playing against in Seattle, it is very tough sledding. You can't hear anything as an offensive lineman. It's always a tough one. And we're going to move on to my bold prediction.
Kyle, got a question for you.
Yeah, what's up, B-Mac?
Was that the loudest stadium you ever played in?
Yes,
Seattle?
yes, it was. And it was Cliff Averill at a wide 9, and it was Michael Bennett at a 5, and they were just running NASCAR packages all day, and Jimmy Clausen was back there.
Did you ever false start there?
Cooking marshmallows. It was a tough day at the office for the kid, but I don't think I gave Cliff Averill a sack. He wanted one, and he kept saying he's going to get one. But, we got out of there alive. Seattle, very, very loud place.
All right, B-Mac, let's get to your bowl prediction next. What do you got?
Okay, I didn't go with a team with my bold prediction. I went with more of an individual or individuals, right? When you look at the league right now, guys, I think it's safe to say it will always be a quarterback-driven league because quarterbacks are overly important, right? But outside of quarterbacks, the league has now started to transition to a wide receiver league. And with that being said, I'll give a date to you guys, and I want to know what you guys were doing on this particular date back in time. November 26th, 1989. Do any one of you guys kind of remember what you were doing? I know I'm older than both of you guys.
I wasn't alive.
1989, November 26th.
I was probably spitting up on my bib and watching my dad play in the playoffs or getting ready to play in the playoffs.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right. But for me, that date is super important in the NFL when it comes to record books. The great Flipper Anderson, right? Willie Flipper Anderson, who was playing for the Los Angeles Rams, he created a record. He had a record that is still relevant to this day. Against the New Orleans Saints, he had 15 receptions for 336 yards and a touchdown. Now, a few years back, if you guys remember, Calvin Johnson came very, very close to breaking that record or tying that record. 2013 against the Dallas Cowboys, he had 14 receptions for 329 yards and a touchdown. My bold prediction this season in the NFL, one of these high prolific wide receivers will break the great Flipper Anderson's receiving yards record in one day. So the target number is 336. All we need is 337. That's it. That's light work. All these guys getting $30+ million. I believe one of these guys will break Flipper Anderson's receiving yards record in the NFL.
Who do we think it would be?
First off, I love that, B-Mac. And I think that some of these receivers that are so dang good and so productive are on teams that are trying to punch up a lot of times week in, week out. So they're going to be throwing the ball all the time. We could see this. And with the quarterback play and with the stuff you're seeing pre-snap, it's all advantageous to the offense. I like where you're heading with this, B-Mac. I like it a lot.
I will say, though, we have 2 300-yard games in the last decade. One was that Calvin Johnson one. One was Julio Jones against the Carolina Panthers back in 2016. Both those guys out the league now. If there's anyone that would do it, I think all eyes would go to like Tyreek Hill, right? If when he goes off, I go back to that. What was it? The Bucs game a few years back when Carlton Davis was following him across the field and just couldn't hang with them. He would be my pick.
Yep.
But I do think like Justin Jefferson, the Vikings this year, they might be down in some games where they're just feeding him left and right.
Well, DJ Moore went for 230 yards last year with Justin Fields at quarterback. So who's not to say
against Washington?
Yeah, a guy like that can't go out there and get thrown the ball a couple more times. Maybe breaks one out into the open field. Maybe you get a cover 2 beater and you get this guy running for 70 yards. Next thing you know, DJ Moore is at 320 yards. We're sniffing that record now, B-Mac.
I think it's doable. I think it's doable. Now, as a former defender in the secondary, you guys know I don't want to see it, but you guys needed a bold prediction. I wanted to make sure I came with my boldness.
That was really good, and I've got a bold one too, and this may ruffle some feathers. This may upset the apple cart. I know we got a lot of Eagles fans that listen here, and obviously my older brother Chris was on the Eagles Super Bowl champ with these guys, and I'm buddies with some of the guys that are going to be mentioned here. So I think that the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles will have a better offensive line than the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles had, and they're losing out on having a Hall of Famer at the very centerpiece of that offensive line. And here's why. I just think these guys are big and bad at tackle. They can help out this center Cam, who's going to be filling in for Jason Kelsey. Landon Dickerson has got to be like 350 pounds. Jordan Mailata is an absolute dump truck at left tackle. Lane Johnson, I don't think there's anybody better in one-on-one pass protection or stretching the play side of a run play than Lane Johnson. And obviously, the big question mark and the thing that remains to be seen is Mekhi Becton's health, his ability to play guard. But I think that Dave Stoutland, the offensive line coach in Philadelphia, has done such a fabulous job developing talent, creating continuity, and I think they're not going to miss a beat. In fact, the center of that offensive line, I feel like, gets stronger this year with some more size inside and with a little bit more youth in the middle. I mean, we all love Jason Kelsey, a first-ballot Hall of Famer, first-ballot human being. That's the reason they just got $100 million. The guy's a huge personality. But I think football fans need to separate church and state a little bit. Jason's no longer in the building, and this group, in my opinion, will be better than the 2023 group. It all comes down to keeping the pressure out of Jalen Hurts' face, particularly in the middle of that pocket, B-Mac.
A little pot-on-pod crime. Shots fired at New Heights.
I love it.
You know what?
And real quick.
We don't want to fight the New Heights guys. They're still active athletically. Me and Mike are just some old heads talking ball now, okay?
Hey, real quick with that take, I love it, Long. But when it comes to the wild card on their offense, I know you talk about Jurgens at center replacing the Hall of Famer, but if they can get anything out of Mekhi Becton, and the only thing you have concerns with is health, because he's one of the more athletic guys on the offensive line. He's one of the bigger guys. But if he can just stay healthy, and it seems like what I'm hearing, he's embraced this new guard role because he was drafted in the league as a tackle, but he's embraced playing more so in the interior, and he's looked really, really good. So when you look at the experience that offensive line has with highly invested players, either via free agency or via draft, I mean, you're on to something. Now, my only concern would be this. How good would this offensive line without Jason Kelce, how good would they be when it comes to the brotherly shove or the tush push?
Yep. Yeah, I do think that there will still be a semblance of the tush push in their playbook, and we talked about it last week, but I don't think they're going to lean as heavily on it because, as you and I both know, some guys are just cut differently physically. Jason Kelce was cut the perfect way to drive that little wedge under the door and get those guys in there for the first down, and that's why they were so successful in short yardage situations. I still think we see that, but we will also see just a lot of mass moving mass, B-Mac. That's what they've done. They brought one of the biggest guys at tackle, Mekhi Becton, put him inside. You're going to have a 700-pound double team between Lane Johnson and Mekhi Becton. My neck hurts, my wrists hurt just thinking about being a defensive lineman going against that group.
I get the nail on the head in that even if they're not better, if you're a defensive lineman, this is a group you want to face less. Because of that, when you get pancaked by two, I mean, they go 350 plus 4 of those 5 guys.
I mean, Landon Dickerson mows his lawn in his free time. That's what he likes to do. He likes to mow his lawn. Guys like that, they're dangerous in a phone booth, man. You want to stay away from the Landon Dickersons of the world.
We'll get to that Eagles matchup. The other side of the ball there, how they fare against this Packers offensive line and how they're going to fare against this Packers receivers right after this. We got a handful of great matchups this weekend. The one we're going to focus on first, we're going to look to Friday night, where it is an NFC heavyweight bout. Eagles, Packers, Brazil. A lot of storylines to get into, but B-Mac, I know you got your eyes on this new look Eagles secondary against this young Packers receiving corps.
No question. I mean, a year ago, with the Eagles defensively, there was a lot of things that were not going right, starting with the guys on the first level, and it trickled down to the guys in the third level. But if you look at this new revamped Eagles secondary, Howie did a phenomenal job adding talent to their secondary to try to improve the overall concept of play. But how would this new look revamped secondary look against, as I call them, the 4 horsemen of the Green Bay Packers when it comes to their wide receivers? You got Keely Ringo, Quinyon Mitchell, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He returns. But look at what they have to go against out in Brazil Friday night. I mean, all 4 guys combined for 2,470 yards and 25 receiving touchdowns. Now, get this, guys. The most talented athletic wide receiver in Christian Watson, he was more out of the lineup than in. And they still was able to provide more than serviceable production for Jordan Love and for their offense. So can this revamped secondary for Philadelphia be able to neutralize or contain the 4 horsemen of the Green Bay Packers when it comes to their top 4 wide receivers? That's the matchup I'm looking for.
It's a great matchup because there's so much unknown in terms of just the talent, because you have guys like Quinyon Mitchell, who's a rookie, who's going to be manning the slot, first-round pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, that a lot of people love.
He's going to be asked to do a lot by Vic.
But he never played slot back at Toledo. You have this Packers rookie receiving corps that was 2 of those guys were rookies. Their entire tight end room were rookies last year. So 4 of their top pass catchers, all rookies. What's their next step in their development look like? And then Christian Watson, kind of like the enigma, who's easily the most talented guy physically in that Packers receiving corps, but it has one hamstring that's made out of tissue paper and just can't stay on the football field. Actually went to, I think, the Wisconsin Medical Center and had them diagnosed that like one hamstring was like 3 times as strong as the other this offseason, and had to like do exercises specifically to avoid that. And so if he's healthy, that's a guy that just you have to account for every play. We saw it in the first play of that Thanksgiving game down the football field against the Detroit Lions. So a lot of great matchups, but a lot of big unknowns. And the one I'm looking for is just how does this new look defense with Vic Fangio coming over to the Philadelphia Eagles, how does this secondary respond? Because last year it was a mess.
Yeah. Well, it's like, are you going to be able to buy in? And we've all had different styles of coaches before. And Vic Fangio, as we all know, he's an old school type of coach. He's that salty dog that's in the team meeting room, doesn't say much. And when he's asked to say anything, he's just like, let's go get him. You know what I'm saying? But for these defenders that are used to this new school style of coaching, particularly these young guys that are going to be in the secondary, they're going to be asked a lot by Vic Fangio. They're going to be asked to do a lot. And when it comes down to Matt LaFleur and his prep, he finds a way to get separation for his receivers. And Vic Fangio is going to try to show Jordan Love and these receivers certain things pre-snaps to try to get them to get to their checks, check with me stuff pre-snap, BMAC. And the next thing you know, it's going to be taken away after the snap. And my question is the defense, the young members of this Eagles defense, ready to step up intellectually enough and make the plays that Vic Fangio will set up for them? Because I promise you, both of these coaches are right. Matt LaFleur will be right in his install and his reasonings why. Yeah. Vic Fangio will be right. It's chess, as you know, B-Mac. But are the pawns going to be able to keep up with this thing quick enough? And for the Green Bay side of the ball, it's the youth in their receiving room. Are they going to continue to progress? They got the targets on their back now in Green Bay. Everybody's got them at the tops of their list. And for the Philadelphia Eagles, are they able to reload, retool, and get this thing firing in the right direction with Vic Fangio at defensive coordinator?
Vivek, I'm curious your thoughts on a guy like Darius Slay at 33 years old, still out there. How does your body feel at that age? And how, we see this thing with cornerbacks where it feels like if they can get past like 30, 31, they can last a long time. But I think we saw a big drop off from Darius Slay a year ago.
We did, and I think we saw a big drop-off from the defense in totality also. And the thing about the locker room, anything that's circulated in the locker room, it becomes contagious. If one side has a bad vibe, that bad vibe, it surfaces throughout the entire locker room. And that's why we saw a decline in production, after the first 11 or 12 games for Philadelphia. Now, for Darius Slay, one of the key components with him still being able to be so productive at this age in his career is he's dodged the injury bullet when it comes to anything significant. A groin pull or a groin tear or a hamstring pull. He's been able to dodge those type of injuries that has allowed him to be able to be more so in the lineup than out. But he has to be the leader for this secondary. He has to be one of the leaders on their defense because they're going kind of through a youth movement. I know they still have Brandon Graham and some of the other guys, but when you look at Brandon Graham and Darius Slay, these two guys have to be the leaders amongst the guys on the defensive side to be able to keep everyone dialed in and focused and also lead through production.
Yeah, I think you hit the other nail on the head here about what I want to talk about in this defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles and how young they are and how ascending they are, because you have guys like Jalen Carter, who was a top 10 pick a year ago, Jordan Davis, who was a first rounder a couple of years ago. You have Milton Williams, who was a third rounder a few years back that came on really strong. You have Bryce Huff, who you just signed from the New York Jets. Who
this is a nightmare
DPR for the longest time. And you still have Brandon Graham out there kind of getting the job done at 36 years old, older than me out there. So they throw a lot at you. That's kind of how they win, is basically one of their guys is going to get a one-on-one. And when that's the case, they trust that guy to win. But against this Packers offensive line, they're young too. Like, it really is quite a youth movement on both sides, the Philadelphia defense, this Packers offensive line, where 4 of those 5 starters are on their rookie deals still. I don't have a good handle on which side wins this, but I think it's going to be tough to get for the Green Bay Packers in that O-line.
Can I say something, guys? I think that was a key point because if they're going to have success defensively, it starts with the guys that put their hand in the dirt. And the 2 most important factors for their defensive front is Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. They have to dominate. Highly invested players via the draft, super athletic, has the size, the strength. They have to dominate. And if you go back to that Super Bowl year for Philly, remember the 2 major components for their defense that was unbelievable. They had around 70 sacks or something like that. It started and it stopped with Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox.
Yep.
They got everything going. So for Philly, Jalen Carter in year 2, man, there's going to be a lot to be asked of you. Jordan Davis, you got to come up. You cannot be 6'6", 363, ran a 4.8, and just playing high as a kite. Get your pad level low and move a man against his will. At some point in time, that's what they brought you in to do. And if he's able to do that, if those 2 guys can be the anchor, Bryce Huff is going to have a heck of a day. Sweat, Brandon Graham, everyone, especially the linebackers I have concerns with as well. But if those guys in the interior can make sure they do what they're supposed to do, the second level guys going to have a heck of a day, and the same can be said for the secondary.
Yeah, it cleans up the whole picture for those linebackers when Jordan Davis is. And you know what? If he is playing super high, I played against a guy by the name of Akeem Hicks who was about the same measurables as this dude, Jordan Davis. Just too dang big, and he's the reason I'm not playing anymore because my neck hurts, B-Mac. But at the end of the day, I knew that when I had him lined up against me, I was going to be fighting a bear the entire practice, like a literal bear. And then you go over on the other side and you talk about Jalen Carter, and he's a guy that can beat you any number of ways. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can beat you with his get-off. He can beat you with outside step, club in. He can beat you, hump moves. He's got all the moves. And for an interior rusher, I think that's the new thing, these interior rushers that can get home a number of ways. They're not just bull rushing because, as you know, the bull rush, it wears the D lineman out, gets him tired, and that's a wasted rep. And it's an easy win for the O lineman if you bull rush. Fletcher Cox was great at running games, setting up BG on TEs and ETs. Those two guys got home a lot. And I loved your point about Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox. And without Fletcher Cox, it leaves that void for who is going to be the true alpha in this room. Because make no mistake about it, Fletcher Cox has been the alpha in that room for a very long time. Him out, Jordan Davis has to step up. Jalen Carter has to continue his ascent to that all-pro level of football that we see flashes of week in, week out.
Yeah, Jalen Carter is the one guy that, as a draft analyst, I can't wait to see because DT is a difficult position to transition year one. Chris Jones was not Chris Jones year one. Aaron Donald was not Aaron Donald year one. It takes a while to adjust that physicality. So the fact that he had almost 50 pressures as a rookie.
Stupid.
He scares me. He scares me a little. All right, Packers-Eagles is not the only game between former playoff teams last year. We got a couple more that we're going to preview in the next block. Cowboys-Browns, Rams-Lions, some key matchups to watch right after this. Welcome back into Pushing the Pile, going through the matchups that will decide the matchups this weekend in the highest profile, the biggest matchups of the weekend. And we're getting to one that might be the biggest mismatch, or at least the toughest matchup for any singular player this weekend. Tyler Guyton, your rookie first-round left tackle from the Dallas Cowboys, gets his welcome to the NFL moment with Myles Garrett, the freakish Browns pass rusher. Easily, in my opinion, the most gifted pass rusher in the NFL as it stands right now. Doubled more than anyone else. I imagine you're not going to get a lot of one-on-ones, but he's still going to get asked to go up against him all day long. And this Cowboys O-line with some youth, whether it's at center and left tackle now, losing what they lost this offseason to Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz, they're going to have their hands full against this Browns D-line. What do you see here, Kyle?
Well, I see a tremendous opportunity for the Cowboys to pick up where they left off in the theme of offensive line dominance. And, Tyler Guyton's not a guy that checked all the boxes. I talked to you about the scouting profiles of these dudes. I didn't watch them a ton in college, but obviously you get to see these guys on tape a little bit in the preseason. I'm not mad about it. You lose a Hall of Famer to the New York Jets and you go draft a left tackle and then you go bring him a buddy, Cooper Beebe, at the center position. I think it's a great opportunity. Go, you know what, man? Put some extra tape on, go out there, maybe double tape, and go have a hell of a heavyweight fight with the best defensive lineman in football. You know what? You can hang your hat on that. Win, lose, or draw, you will earn the respect of your teammates if you go out there and show that you will hold no punches against these guys. I remember my rookie year, my first matchup was Geno Atkins. And I don't know if you guys know Geno Atkins like I know Geno Atkins, but I didn't touch him much week one. But I gave my best effort. We ended up winning the football game. And it was one of those things where after the game, you get that respect from the other guys in your room. And there's no mistake about it that 52 other guys on this team are saying, I wonder how Guyton's going to do against Myles Garrett. Well, go out there and put up a fight. It could be a lot of fun. The Cowboys fans will love you for life if you go out there week one. First impressions, okay? And I know this offensive coordinator is going to say, let's go try to get after Myles Garrett early. They're going to have some traps, some whams. They're going to find a way to get his eyes all over the map. They want to confuse Myles Garrett and slow down that F-350 supercharged pickup truck that is Myles Garrett.
Yeah, and the thing about the NFL world, Kyle, you know about this being in the locker room. When you have a young player, a rookie going against a dude, one of the best in the world, we already know it's going to be a long, long day for you. But it's our job to go out and encourage you the week of, and also to make sure we're giving you the assistance that we need to give you. because we're not expecting you to go out and shut down instantly one of the best in the world. He's going to get his plays, but we need you to get a play here or there, and it's our job collectively to be able to assist you and help you throughout the ball game. But one thing I'll say this, when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys and drafting offensive linemen, they've been doing a phenomenal job getting key young players into their organization. These guys established to be a cemented block in what they do on the front. Cooper Beebe, I think he's going to be a dog also.
Yep.
I mean, look at what Jerry has done in years past when we look at the offensive linemen that he's drafted. So they're going to be fine, but this is a great opening day. It's not a great opening day experience. It's a tough one when you talk about Myles Garrett and Zadarius and, Thomason. I mean, Quentin Jefferson. Man, they got some dudes on that defensive line that can go.
Here's the thing. Mike McCarthy's no dummy. He knows this is not one to leave Guyton or Terrence Steele on islands. You're Jake Ferguson, you're chipping all day long. You're Luke Schoonmaker, your backup tight end, you're going to be in a lot of plays. We cannot have these 4 wide empty sets putting our tackles on islands. It's just not going to happen. So Mike McCarthy's no dummy. He knows it's going to happen, but the problem is the Browns throw so much at you, whether it's a secondary against this receiving core, that CeeDee Lamb's still ramping up and may not be able to go, every snap of the offensive plays. So there's just a lot that this Cowboys offense is going to have to deal with right out the gate.
I like what you said about they're going to have to allocate resources. I mean, it's obvious. They're not going to just throw Guyton out there week 1 against Myles Garrett. But you have to also keep in mind it's a numbers game. When you allocate more numbers to the line of scrimmage, you're going to have less guys out on routes. But luckily, they got this guy by the name of CeeDee Lamb, who's pretty darn good at the game of football. Dak Prescott, historic season last year. They're going to pick up where they left off. And I think for CeeDee Lamb, he may not have been signed, but the guy's definitely going to be in great shape. He's an absolute Adonis at the receiver position. There's only a handful of guys who are physically put together like that. And I think CeeDee Lamb picks up where he left off. He needs to take advantage. He needs to really make them pay. They're going to have all these guys up there in protection. There's only going to be a handful of guys on routes. You got to win your routes, CeeDee Lamb. Get the ball out of Dak's hands because we all know who's coming. Big 95.
A couple of guys that are going to need to win their routes as well. On Sunday Night Football, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, traveling against this new-look Detroit Lions secondary. B-Mac, what have you seen from the Lions in this secondary, and what should we expect from them this season after pretty much turning over their entire cornerback room from a year ago?
The talent has improved dramatically when it comes to the Lions secondary, especially the cornerback position, starting with Carlton Davis. Remember, they traded for Carlton Davis during the offseason. He was a huge plus. Terrion Arnold. I love Brian Branch. I think Brian Branch is one of the best nickel safety defenders in the National Football League. He does a great job in coverage, but the thing I love about him, he's willing to stick his face in that fan. He's a great tackler, and he does so because he loves to tackle. I love that about what he brings to the table. In year 2 for him, I see an all-pro-like year for Brian Branch. So this secondary, on paper, they should be better. But, of course, you got to go put it out on film. But this is a matchup Sunday night, too. I mean, many people, they're expecting a lot of points. I wouldn't be surprised because we know Jared Goff does a phenomenal job playing indoors there in Detroit. And then when you look at Matthew Stafford with Sean McVay and the way they orchestrate things offensively, they're going to find a way to put points on the scoreboard as well. But for Detroit, this should be an entertaining year because their defense, they got to stay healthy. Remember, health was an issue for them a year ago. So many key contributors were getting injured in the secondary. If they can stay healthy, I think they're going to be a much improved group for their entire team.
Yeah, I think the experience gained from some of those injuries you bring up, Brian, is really important leading into this football season. And we know that this is a really tough physical football team in Detroit, and Dan Campbell expects his team to go and carry his persona onto the football field, and they do. They're a team that not a lot of people want to play, and it starts up front with the offensive line. But look, that defensive secondary, are they going to be able to carry out that physicality? Are they going to be the guys that are the bell cows on the field when they're out there? Because we know how the offense is going to ride. As an O-lineman, I really love what they do in Detroit. But if they can find a way to match and have complementary toughness on defense with their offense, my goodness, watch out.
The guy I want to see, Brian Branch, slot mainly last year. They put him at safety more full-time this year because you go back to that NFC Championship game. The 49ers were getting into sets to get him off the football field to keep the Lions in the base defense. They don't want Brian Branch off the football field. He was their best defensive back a year ago. Playing at safety now, I think Sean McVay's no dummy, though. I don't think they even look at this secondary. They're targeting the linebackers in this game. They're sending guys over the middle of the football field. They're targeting Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes. He's no dummy. So that game is going to be one of the best of the weekend, but I do think this Lions secondary, it gives them a better shot once it comes to the postseason. All right, we have a ton of good matchups to get to here. We have 49ers Jets, some good ones in that one. O-line, D-line. We have Colts Texans, talking about the trenches there as well. And then finally, we're going to preview a little Thursday night football right after this. We got our eyes all looking ahead to Monday Night Football, where Aaron Rodgers takes the football field yet again. Jets travel across the country to San Francisco to face the 49ers. Not the scene of the crime last year for Aaron Rodgers, but it's another Monday Night Football game on week one where he tore his Achilles last year. But we're turning our attention to the guys protecting him, because that was the issue last year. They didn't have anyone to protect him, and then Zach Wilson, obviously, when he took over. But they made some changes this year. We got Tyron Smith at left tackle. We got Morgan Moses at right tackle. And we got Olu Fashanu as insurance if either of those guys goes down. So, Kyle, how do they match up with this 49ers defensive front that admittedly lost a little in their own right, with Eric Armstead now gone, Chase Young, who obviously was only there half a season, also gone. But Nick Bosa is still there, and it's still the 49ers defensive line.
Well, I think about these tackles, and I look at Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, and both guys with a lot of experience in this league. Obviously, guys on different ends of the tier program that we like to run. Morgan Moses, he's obviously a great football player. He's played for a very long time. I watched him at UVA for a while. And then you talk about Tyron Smith, one of the greats that we've seen at the left tackle position. So credit to the Jets for bringing these guys in. But when you talk about the teeth of this offensive line, I got to talk about a guy by the name of John Simpson, who is an absolute glass eater at guard. He was in Baltimore. We love watching him a lot. And now you get an opportunity to have those skilled, experienced veterans at tackle, and you've got the young guys inside with Elijah Vera Tucker and John Simpson. You have an opportunity to play some bully ball. And the bully ball will come into play with that second level of the defense, right? It's not necessarily that front. It's when you have a double team and somebody's got to climb off that double team and get to the linebacker. What are you going to do there? I know for a fact that John Simpson has bad intentions when he gets to the second level in the run game. And as far as the pass goes, you know this better than anybody, B-Mac, when they're running the ball and you start to load the box and you start to get on your toes and get downhill, the next thing you know, it's Aaron Rodgers pulling the ball out of his back pocket and somebody's streaking across the field. I'm going to be looking for that physicality early and often. Obviously, the personnel is good in the New York Jets operation. They did a great job. But it's going to be commitment to the running game early, getting those backs involved, and then letting Aaron play the game that Aaron plays, which is, let me see what the defense is doing. Okay, we got this. Bang, bang, boom. Touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Yeah, I think Nathaniel Hackett is the most important offensive member for the Jets. And the reason why I say that is because, to your point, Kyle, what type of game plan he's going to display against San Francisco. Because, yes, San Francisco, they have some names, notable names on the defensive front, but they've been vulnerable in years past, especially a year ago when they faced downhill running. If you go back and look at Baltimore, I think it was Christmas night. Look at the success Baltimore had against them running downhill. If you look at the playoff game with Detroit, when Detroit dominated that ball game for 3.5 quarters, running downhill. When you run downhill at those guys, you can find success. And Breece Hall, I call Breece Hall, he is our generation of Fred Taylor. A big physical back, over 220, 4'3", jump cut, one-cut guy, can run over you or run through you, and he's a big play waiting to happen. That's who he reminds me of, what he's done so far in this early professional career. And if you get Breece Hall going, now, Kyle, you got the play action. You got the boots, the rollouts. You got everything at your arsenal, because they have to really focus in on this downhill running. Don't run east and west. Sideline, Fred Warner's going to eat that up. They're going to eat that up. You got to come down here to teeth of their defense, and sometimes it's the dirtier way to do it, but it can be the most efficient as well.
Yeah, the only way, too, is through in this case. I like your point about that. You got to go attack these guys and fight fire with fire against San Francisco.
I'm with you guys. Everyone wants to call this Aaron Rodgers versus the 49ers. This is going to be a run game for the Jets, in my opinion. If you're looking at the mismatches, it's Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave, those two DTs for the 49ers. Yeah, they can get upfield in the pass game, but double teams can take those guys out quickly. And when you have the guards that they do, in John Simpson, Elijah Vera Tucker, I'm running doubles.
John Simpson loves to say, no white tees in the club. He's going to get you up out of the club. That's what he does, man. That's what he does.
Another quarterback battle that I think turns into a running back battle.
Yep.
Colts, Texans. I think this Colts and this offensive line against this Texans defensive line is probably the biggest mismatch of that game. I think this offensive line, intact from a year ago, only getting better in terms of guys developing like left tackle Bernard Raymond, and only getting better in terms of Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor are now back together
for
the very first time, basically, because the last time they showed up, well, Anthony Richardson got hurt very early on in that game. So I think you see this turn into a smash mouth 30-carry game from Jonathan Taylor. That is, if they can get to a lead or close. And I think they have the advantage here because the interior of this Texans front is just lacking comparatively to what we saw a year ago. Obviously, Malik Collins leaves, but Mario Edwards, Foley Fatukasi, Tim Settle Jr., those are your DTs. I think they got a little bit of a mismatch here.
Yeah, and these guys love to rush the passer in Houston. You look at the names at the top and the bottom there, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter is like a pass rusher extraordinaire. The guy is, mom, dad, and God designed this guy to be a pass rusher. If you look at him, he is just an absolute freak show. But to your point, you can put your hand in the dirt and go get after these guys. And I think about the mentality of some of these offensive linemen like Quentin Nelson and the other guys in that room that you were talking about. They want to take the pressure off of Anthony Richardson. They say, hey, young man, don't you worry about it. We got your back, okay? We're going to run the football. We'll be home by 7 o'clock drinking beer because we're going to run the football and that clock's going to be running. If I'm a Colts player, I don't want all the pressure to be on Anthony Richardson. I want to say, put the burden on me as an O-lineman and let me handle this thing. Let's run it. And when it is an advantageous situation to throw the football, throw it. And when you're out in the open field, get down, Anthony Richardson. Get down.
Hey, Kyle. Is it a thing for offensive linemen to drink beers after a game on Sunday?
Oh, love a good beer after, in the parking lot. You get your wife or your girlfriend and all the wags, they get together and they hang out, in the parking garage. And when you walk out there, you can't wait to go have a beer, especially after a win. And especially after a game when you run the ball, maybe you get a 100-yard rusher. They're looking to do that against the Houston Texans.
Hey, Mike, that's the life of an offensive lineman. You can go ahead and bully someone for 4 quarters and go out and drink a brewski on the stadium grounds.
Pack a dip, drink a beer, call it a night, boys. Call the Uber.
Hey, for me, I love both of you guys' insight with this game. And Jonathan Taylor should have a huge day. But for Jonathan Taylor to be at his best and for this offensive line to be at their best, they cannot call this ball game offensively, the Colts that is, with bubble wrap around Anthony Richardson. You're right, Kyle. He has to get down, but he needs to be a part of this running game, either as a +1 improvising or design quarterback runs. Because when you drafted Anthony Richardson top 5 over a year ago, you didn't draft him just to throw the football. You drafted him to be a playmaker because when you're 6'4", 6'5", 240-ish, running 4.38, it's your job to be
You're a weapon.
A playmaker. Yes. So if he can, I need to see together combined, I need to see at least 30 rushes for Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. Of course, more so to Jonathan Taylor because he's the running back, but I need to see at least 10 design touches for Anthony Richardson to kind of keep this defense from Houston honest, and they have to respect that because if he's not running the football, their offense Indy won't be at their best.
B-Mac, this reminds me about a guy that I've watched in the National Basketball Association by the name of LeBron James. And LeBron James, yeah, he can shoot threes akin to Anthony Richardson. Yes, he can throw the football. But what do we love to see LeBron do the most? What makes him the most dominant? I want to see a slash, I want to see a drive, and I want you to attack that rim because that will that will make the fear happen for this defense. And to your point, that's a really great point. When I think about what makes the Ravens so difficult to scheme for, particularly in the low red area and short yardage, is now you got 11 guys who can get the football essentially with Lamar Jackson keeping it in his hand. I think it's criminal when he hands it off at the goal line. It's like either have him throw it or run the ball. Same with Anthony Richardson. That's a great point, B-Mac.
I love that transition from you also because we're talking Thursday night football.
Boom, boom, boom.
Right after this. And we finally got football tonight. Ravens traveling to KC to face the champs. Chiefs are 3-point favorites. Over or under in that game is 46.5. B-Mac, how do we see this one playing out?
Pat Mahomes going to do Pat Mahomes-like things. The best player in the world. And playing in this ball game is different. You know what I mean? I had an opportunity to play in a few of these matchups as the reigning champions at home Thursday night. Everyone's watching, and the atmosphere is electric. Yeah, and I know we saw Detroit beat Kansas City last year in week 1, but remember, they didn't have Chris Jones or Travis Kelce, and it still was a 1-point ball game. With them having all members on deck, along with the energy that will be in Arrowhead Stadium, yes, they're playing against a legit team in the Baltimore Ravens with some superstars on their side. I still got to take Pat Mahomes. I got to rock and roll with Pat Mahomes because I know this about Pat Mahomes. If you believe or if you put money on Pat Mahomes to win, you're going to win more than you're going to lose. So me personally, I think this offense will be better. They will be more efficient. I don't think they will have the drops that we saw early on in the year in 2023 from the wide receivers. Defensively, I have a little concerns about the defensive style of play, but Steve Spagnuolo will have a game plan in place. Even not having a guy like L'Jarius Sneed in the secondary over the last few years, he's still going to have a game plan in place. So I'm taking Pat Mahomes. You guys just saw it there on the graphic. The head-to-head matchup has been in favor of Kansas City and Pat Mahomes when facing Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. Like I said, that stadium is going to be electric. The atmosphere, the momentum, everything on the Chiefs side. So I'm taking Pat.
You know, historically speaking, a lot of people would say, let's go with Lamar Jackson here because he is such a great quarterback when he's the underdog. But look, at the end of the day, it's the motivation factor. And I'm gonna take you back to 2019. That's my time machine noise, 2019. Patrick Mahomes probably sitting in the facility in Kansas City watching the MVP voting and watching Lamar Jackson take home the MVP. And he's thinking, hey, that's mine. Hey, that's mine. But you know what? I'm going to go win a Super Bowl. And I know for a fact that's how Patrick Mahomes operates. Because you can have the MVP. I'm going to go get me a couple Lombardis. And tonight, at Arrowhead Stadium, it's that same guy, Patrick Mahomes, who's sitting in the facility watching people talk about Lamar Jackson and talking about this is the year for the Ravens, talking about this is the year, or these are the situations where Lamar Jackson reaches up and does superhuman things, you know, an underdog on the road. Nah, dude, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, it's business as usual. They got better on offense, they retain their talent on defense. Steve Spagnuolo is still going to be the guy that frustrates every defense that comes in. No L'Jarius Sneed, well, let's get these young guys coached up. Let's get Joshua Williams, the 6'3", ball deflector out there, the rangy DB. We're going to see a lot of youth coming on for these Kansas City Chiefs. I'm excited. I'm going Chiefs for this one.
I will say, I just think it's interesting because I haven't heard a lot of people give the Ravens a chance here. But if we've, I can't do the time machine noise, but if we go back in our time machine to like week 15 last year, the Ravens were the class of the AFC. They had a plus 200 point differential last year. The Chiefs were seen as like maybe even missing the playoffs. Actually, that's not even true, but they were just like, they were seen as an afterthought. So it's funny how quickly things have changed, but I do think they have meaningfully changed. And I am also leaning the Kansas City Chiefs. But I like Derrick Henry's rushing prop over in this one. I have him over 68.5. So I think he has a big game for himself as well. But there you have it. There's our show for the day. Pushing the pile. B-Mac, thank you for
football's here.
Kyle, thank you.
Thanks, B-Mac.
Your time. And we will be back next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9:30 a.m. We'll also be 1 p.m.
Scan the QR code
on next Monday. Scan that QR code. Follow us on Spotify. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, helps us out. Until next time.
Good luck to your teams.
And keep pushing.